my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. I got little pots of pine spread out all over the lot, 'cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard.
Hello and welcome to Grow Your Own. This is the 2021 Indoor Series and we got a really special project for you. Deb and I are going to be working together on this one, and we're going to be doing a drip irrigation system in her ebb and flow table. So the first thing that we're going to do is try to do a layout. So it's always good to maybe just do a little sketch and kind of sketch out what you got. You see, I've drawn the slabs in, and then I'm trying to figure out what kind of fittings we're going to need to run this irrigation system. And you can see I've drawn it out, you know, with a T, some elbows, 1/2-inch tubing, and then we're going to have feeder lines that go into each one of the cubes. And the number of parts we're going to need are all listed over here. So you see I figured out all the stuff that we need, all the dimensions, and how to spread this thing out. So let's get started. The first step is to soak the cubes. Deb has figured out the application rates for all the nutrients that we're going to soak the cubes in. Right now we've got the reservoir in the bathroom that we use as a spare bathroom, and it has water in it that's been pH balanced, and we're now going to put nutrients in it and then soak those cubes. Okay, here's our reservoir full of water ready to soak the cubes, and Deb's done some calculations. So let's have a look at what she's done.
Yes, we're using the GrowTech Precision line for this drip system grow. And I have gone through, we know our reservoir is 25 gallons or 94.6 liters. So I've done my calculations. We're going to start out with transplant with this amount of the Grow Micro Bloom and the Vitamax Pro. What I'm going to be doing is putting this solution for transplant into our reservoir and soaking our 6-inch cubes to get them ready to receive the plants. And we're going to do this pH at 5.5.
Deb's just shaking up the nutrients, getting them all mixed up. Sometimes they settle, you know, a little bit while they're on the shelf and they're just kind of sitting there. So just always give everything a good shake before you start adding it in. We put in the grow, in goes the bloom, in the measured amounts that are appropriate for the amount of water in there. And finally, in goes the micro. So that's the grow, micro, and the bloom into the reservoir. We're stirring it up. And
There's one more to go in.
Oh, and what's that?
That is the Vitamax Pro.
Ah, Vitamax Pro.
Yeah.
Okay, so Deb's going to put in some Vitamax Pro. Why are we putting that in, Deb?
Because this helps for your root growth, helps make the plant strong, and is easier for it on the transplant, especially since we're taking out of a soilless mix and putting it into a rock wool cube.
Right, good reasons. So VitaPro is in, and Deb's just going to take a check on the pH.
So I had pH the water previously to us adding nutrient in it a few days ago, and before we started out I checked it and it had gone up to 6.1 with nothing in it. But even so, going through the boogie filter, it held pretty good. And we are at 5.6. It's not gonna go down anymore due to temperature fluctuations. Check at different places in the reservoir. Okay, so we need to go down 1.
So Deb's just putting a little bit of 20% pH down phosphoric acid into the reservoir. We just have to bring it down 1 point, and that's why she's using the 20%. Moving forward, we'll probably be using the 85% because it's a fairly large amount of water, and you'd have to use a lot of 20% to bring it down. So we're stirring it in. Let's take that pH reading. And there's a point. And 5.6 is our target. Is that right?
It's 5.5.
5.5, and look at that. It just went to 5.5.
Yep.
So it looks like we put in the perfect amount. So here we go, we're putting in the cubes. And they're actually bubbling as they soak up the water. You see, we get them completely submerged, they'll bob around, kind of float around in there. But that's what you want. You're gonna leave them in there for a little bit. let them soak up all that nutrient, all that pH balanced water. This is what we call conditioning, and conditioning is important when using rock wool. And there's the last 2 cubes. Look at the amount of air that these things hold. That's incredible, isn't it? But that's what makes rock wool so nice as a medium. It holds an equal 50-50 air to water ratio.
Right, and you want to hold them down until they quit bubbling. Once they stop bubbling and they're no longer trying to float, then you know you've gotten a good saturation of your weak nutrient solution and your conditioning pH for the cubes.
So what strength did you put the nutrient in for this soaking?
I put the nutrient strength in at a transplant strength.
Which is what percentage-wise?
It is approximately about a third
Of the regular dose?
of the regular, quarter to a third of the regular use.
Okay, great. Okay, so we've put the cubes in some 5-gallon buckets, and we're just gonna add some water to the bucket, and that's just to keep them soaking, because they've got to soak for a little while, and we need to move on and get the reservoir installed so that we can soak the slabs, because obviously the slabs aren't going to fit in the reservoir, so we're going to use a different method to precondition the slabs.
I could do it here.
Okay, we're using a little giant, I believe a PE1 pump, and its outlet is just the right size to put a straight barbed connector on. So there's a straight barbed connector on there, but I've just temporarily put the 1/2-inch tubing on there, and we're going to use that submersible pump to empty the reservoir into the shower. So we tried our pump and it didn't work. Sometimes after using it and sits for a long time, it can get a little bit of stuff onto the impeller. There's a little impeller that turns around in there, and it had seized up, so it wouldn't work. So what we did was we took these screws off. First you take this cap off, then you take these screws out, and then I just kind of got it going, and then we plugged it in and it worked. So don't give up if your pump doesn't work right away after a long term time of not using it. You can always give it a little push or a clean, and quite often they'll start right back up for you. So it looks like we're all good to go. So we put the pump back together, and she's working just fine now, and we're draining the water out into the shower. Now we're getting ready to position the 6-inch cubes onto the slabs. We're trying to distribute them evenly. You see we're leaving 3 inches on this end, and we're leaving more of a space in between. We're leaving about 7.5 inches in between. So what we're doing is we've got one marked here, and that's right dead center of the table. And then we move these out a little further, so you leave in more space in between here and here, so that the plants, when they grow, they're going to overlap a little bit. You're going to give them as much room to grow as you can, and then at the end you're closer to the edge, because you're also closer to the edge of the tray. So if they grow out this way, it's okay. So while Deb finishes marking off the locations for each of the slabs, the next step is to take these squares, and we're going to cut that right out.
Okay, so Ross is cutting out where we've marked the blocks as to where they're going to go on the slabs. Remember, the blocks are already being conditioned, and this is going to make it so that once we complete doing where the blocks are going to sit and do a couple more slits on the bottom of the slabs, which we'll show you, then we're going to pH adjust these at 5.5 and saturate them.
Okay, we got all the squares cut, so each square gets a block.
Now Ross is putting the slits in the slabs, and there will be 3 on each side, so a total of 6 per slab. And then we'll get ready to flood them.
Okay, the next thing we have to do before we can actually pre-treat these slabs is get the plumbing in place. So we're going to do a bit of plumbing. First step I'm going to do is to take this straight connector, and I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to leave a little bit out on the bottom to connect to the submersible pump with this in between, and then I'm going to have enough of it coming out the top to connect just a little piece of hose with a T and make the runners just like you see in the drawing there. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the end of my straight connector, a little bit of, just a little bit of vegetable oil. It just helps them slip in a little better. I still like to use a pair of gardening gloves when I'm doing fittings because you got to push pretty hard on some of them, so it kind of just saves your hands and your fingers from getting all sore. So I'm just going to gradually stick that straight connector into that grommet, and that grommet's left over from Deb's ebb and flow episode, and you should probably check that ebb and flow episode out. It's pretty good. So there we go. We've got our 1/2 inch there, and if we come down underneath here, you can see there's the other part. So that's the part that's going to connect to the submersible pump, and up here is the part that's going to connect to the feeder lines. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just cut a couple of short pieces of 1/2 inch. It's just got to be enough to go over the fitting and leave me a little to work with on top, and that's where I'll put my T for the feeder lines. I'm also going to cut a second piece to go underneath that's going to connect to the other side of this straight fitting and then to this valve. Okay, so here we go. Let's cut a piece. Let's see. I'm going to say about that long right there. I got my Echo cutters. Get yourself a decent cutter. Pruning shears work really good too. The pruners that you would use to take low branches off your outside bushes and whatnot. But just get yourself a pair of decent cutters. Okay, next I'm going to hook this little piece up. I'm just going to, again, I'm going to put a little bit of vegetable oil on that fitting right there. And then I'm going to put this piece of tubing down on it. Just have to get past that first barb down to the second barb and a little bit onto the second barb. And then we've got a nice snug fit and we're going to have no leaks. So now I can put my T on there. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that T on. Always reach down underneath and kind of support what you're doing, because if you push too hard, you can push the darn thing right through. Okay, so there's the T for the feeder lines. Okay, so I'm just putting that other small piece that I cut onto the bottom part of that straight connector so that we can now hook this ball valve on. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Again, a little bit of vegetable oil just makes it slide in a little easier. And up she goes. So now we can regulate the flow. Okay, this is called the tub drain. You can get these at BMA Hydroponics, by the way. They've got a washer. Always make sure that the washer's on the inside of the tray. Don't get it on the outside of the tray. That's not where it belongs. It belongs up here on the inside of the tray. So you just drop that in, take the threaded part, turn it around the right way, and you thread that on the bottom, and you just do it up. Oh, nice and snug, kind of hand tight. You know, you want to make sure it's snug, that it's not going to leak. So you just got to torque it on there a little bit, and that's where a little piece of 3/4 inch tubing will go for the drain. Okay, it's time to cut our connectors to the T. So what we're going to do is we're going to have it connect to the T, and then I'm saying about 1/3 of the way down this row of squares, that's where the feeder line is going to go. So that feeder line is going to go all the way to the end of the tray, which means we're going to have an elbow right here. So if that's where it's going to be, I'm going to put my fingers right where that is, and on the other end I've got it lined up with the full position on the T. So that's where I'm going to make my cut. There's that. Now I can use this one. I think, no, I'm going to have to measure that one with my hand too. Make sure you always check. Check twice, cut once. That's what they say, right? So there, to about 1/3 of the way in on that one. Slightly shorter piece for this side. And there we go. Okay, I'm gonna put that'd be a good suggestion. I'm gonna put these elbows on first before I connect it on the other end. Otherwise, it's connected on here and I'm struggling with an elbow. And it just makes it more sense to just kind of do it before I do the next one. So, you know, that's the way it's going to be, like that. Okay, so I'm ready to put this onto the T. Got the elbow over here. One thing I'm noticing, and you might notice because this has been coiled up for a long time, you end up with a bend sometimes, especially if you're near the bottom of the roll. So you can take advantage of that sometimes because this is raised up a little bit higher than the level of the tray. So if I put this down and I have the curve going down, you see what it does? It helps it lay completely flat so that the feeder tube is right down on the table. Okay, so we've got our two sides in. with the curve running down, and you see that really helps this lay flat on the bottom. Now go the feeder lines. Okay, I'll put a little vegetable oil on the ball valve so I can put this short piece of tubing in. And then we're actually going to reuse the drain hose from Deb's ebb and flow episode. It's already got a ball valve on it and it's got a T right here. So we're going to put this in line here, and we're going to put that on there. And then I can control. This is open to go when we flood the table. We close this one and then open this one when we want to drain, and the pump pumps it out into the shower. Okay, next we're going to connect the submersible pump to the intake. So we're going to measure it up. I'm going to leave a little bit extra on there just to give it a little bit of play in case you have to tilt the reservoir a little bit or something when you're draining it. So I've taken some 3/4 inch tubing, I've measured it out, and I'm just going to give it a cut. And then we're going to put that onto the tub drain that we put in there so that we can drain it back into the reservoir. There we go. That should do it.
So we've taken a piece of 3/4 inch tubing to block the tub drain for right now. And we're going to be taking advantage of, before we put the end plugs in and apply the emitter tubing, to just condition these slabs, get them to 5.5, and then we'll be able to put our cubes on top that we pre-soak, change our reservoir again, and start planting. Okay, so now we have these saturated. I'm pulling this 3/4 inch tubing out. It's now draining back into the reservoir. We will have our pump hooked up to a timer later when it's time. Right now we're just conditioning everything.
Okay, Deb's just gathering up our drain hose. This is the one that she used during the ebb and flow series, and we're just reusing it again here. So we're going to stretch it out, take it out to the shower. Deb's going to put it in the shower, and then what we're going to do is we're going to turn these bypass valves on and off. So this one's going to go off, that one's going to go on. Then we'll put on the pump, and it'll start to drain. So end of the hose is in the shower, ready to go.
Okay, so I'm going to plug the pump in. Let's just make sure everything is turned how it should be. This needs to be open. This needs to be closed so we don't have any water going from the pump up into the table again. This is open to our drain that's already in the shower. And now I'm going to plug in the pump. And I'm just going to run and check if everything's good in the shower. We have water draining in the shower now, and I'm just watching the level on my reservoir to make sure my pump doesn't run dry. When it gets down too low, I will shut the pump off, and I'll show you how we finish clearing out the reservoir.
BMA Hydroponics are growing. Now they have 2 awesome locations with twice as much of what you need to succeed. BMA have thousands of products for every grower, from beginner to expert, offering friendly advice for friendly people who grow big plants. Visit one of the BMA Hydroponics superstores at 404 Maitland Drive in Belleville or 105 Sutherland Drive in Kingston. Check out products and locations online. BMAHydroponics.com.
The only way to go. So while Deb is draining the reservoir, I'm going to go ahead and put these end plugs into the end of these feeder lines, and then I will put in the vortex emitters. Okay, I've got the end plugs in the ends. Now I'm going to make 18 holes, 9 in each side. These are called vortex emitters. I'm going to be putting 18 of these into the tubing, the feeder line, and each one of these will put out 2 gallons per hour of water. So that's going to equalize the flow to each emitter and back to the pump. I'm going to be putting these vortex emitters in groups of 3, gathered together wherever there's a square. So there'll be 3 right here and 3 over there. 2 are going to go over into the end one. 1 is going to come into here. Same over here. 2 are going to go into this side one, and 1 is going to go into there. So everybody will have 2 feeder lines.
Okay, we've gotten down as far as our submersible pump is going to do. So now I've got something called a bilge pump. This is going to get rid of everything left in the reservoir. And I'm pumping it into a 5-gallon bucket. This is fast, efficient, and they're around, well, when I got mine a couple years ago, it was just under $40 at Canadian Tire. But they're one of the handiest things for emptying out the reservoir.
So while Deb finishes off draining the reservoir, I'm going to be making holes, and I'm just going to use a pair of pruning shears. They've got a nice sharp tip on them. So I'm just going to use these to make a little hole, and that hole is going to take one of these 2-gallon vortex emitters. They have a pointy side, and that pointy side is the one that goes into the tubing, and this is the one. The other one is the one that the emitter tubing hooks up to. There you go. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. So that's going to put 2 feeder lines into each plant. So I've attached emitter tubing. Sometimes some people call it spaghetti tubing. It's emitter tubing, 1/8 inch, and you see I've got it right onto that vortex emitter. That's going to come up, and I'll cut it off at the appropriate length to reach this plant. You're going to find it hard to get this emitter tubing onto these barbs. So what you need to do is just give it just a little teeny bit of heat. It doesn't take much, just like that much, and then it just slips right on. And then as it cools off, it contracts back down, and it makes a nice tight fit. So Deb and I are just preparing the cuttings that we got from Steve. You may have met Steve. He works at BMA Hydroponics. Great guy, mostly out in the warehouse, but I'm sure you've seen him around. The only problem is they are in ProMix. So ProMix is not going to sit well in rock holes. So Deb is gently massaging all the dirt off of the roots, and you can see the roots are hanging down. They'll be just fine. Like, she's doing it so very carefully that she's not bruising the roots or tearing any roots or anything like that. And then once she's got the dirt, or the majority of it, off, we've got a bucket of water down here, and we've pH balanced this water, and it's also been brought to temperature. In other words, we put a little bit of warm water just to kind of make it lukewarm, kind of room temperature stuff, so that it doesn't shock the plant. So here comes Deb with the roots and into the water, and we just give them a little wash off, and there you go. Just about, anyway. So we'll get the rest of that dirt residue off, and then we're going to take them into the room and put them into the cube. Okay, so we're going to put it in the cube now. There's just a touch of dirt left in there. It's not going to hurt anything, as long as we got, we got 99.9% of it off, and it's really just nice roots going into a nice home. They should enjoy it there, and they should probably take to their new home quite quickly. Okay, and Deb's just plugging in the last plant. So that's 9 plants ready to go. We're probably not going to water these for a day or two, just because that's what they recommend with the rock wool, just to give the roots a chance to get into the cube. I'm just about finished putting in all these drip emitter flow controls. These are little valves that control the flow, just so that we can turn some off. We're only going to be running 1 dripper to start, and we'll be using these to turn them off and to regulate the flow in the future. So I just got a couple more of those to put on. I'll just show you how you put those on, and we'll be right back. Normally we would not recommend putting peat pucks into rock wool, but that's just was something we had to do because we just didn't have the time to go through the whole process of starting a mother and making cuttings and whatnot. So Steve was nice enough to give us some cuttings, and we're gonna make them work in the rock wool. But it's like I say, it's not what we would recommend you do. we would recommend you start them off in something else, like another Rockwell cube, a starter cube, or even a rapid rooter, but I don't think they make rapid rooters anymore, so unfortunately we're stuck with Rockwell. And we can make this work. So if we're careful and we do all the right things, we won't have any problems. Okay, so I just got a couple more flow emitters to put on there. Again, what I'm doing is I'm just gently heating the end of the tube, and that's it. I mean, that's all you need right there. And then you just give it a little push, and it slides right down on there for you. There you go. Look at that. Perfect. So it's 2 days later, and everybody seems to have taken to their new homes. We've got all the drippers all hooked up. Deb is about to fill out the chalkboard, which is a blank right now. And then we're going to put some nutrients in the res. We're going to start the first flood, and we're going to turn off one dripper from each plant, just for the first one anyway. Okay, so what have we added there, Deb?
We're going into the vegetative stage, so 284 milliliters of the grow, 142 milliliters of the bloom, 189 milliliters of micro, and 95 milliliters of Vitamax Pro.
Excellent.
Now I'm going to pH the reservoir to, it calls for 6.4, which is a little high, but we're going to go with what
Go by the
nutrient
directions, yeah.
says.
We gotta do what it says. Okay, so we got the aerator in there. Got some bubbling action going on. Next step is to turn on the pump, start flooding. Okay, so 2-gallon vortex emitters, not such a great idea. We tried the existing pump that we had, and it wasn't enough pressure to push it through these vortex emitters. So we went and got a bigger pump and tried that one, and lo and behold, it wasn't enough either. So, you know, we're gonna make some mistakes as we go along, like dropping knives, and we're gonna correct those mistakes. But we're going through these mistakes so that you don't have to. So, vortex emitters require too much pressure. Don't use vortex emitters, but it's an easy fix. If you watch what I'm doing here, I got these set up with these flow adjusters. I'm just going along and I'm just pulling out the vortex emitter, taking the flow adjuster and sticking it right back in that hole. So now we've got flow adjusters down here where we can regulate the flow, and I'm just cutting the ends off the vortex emitter and putting it right back in its place. Okay, so you can see I've set these in reverse order. So this one's going to be pouring down over here, this one's going to be pouring down over there. And I've done that for each one all the way along, and these are going to just be free flowing, only adjusted by the adjusters. Now those vortex emitters, if you've got, you know, a really big pump, 1,500 or 2,000 pounds, you know, then you might get it through those. So for outdoor use, for larger systems, I think they're a good option, but not for the small systems. They're just too much to push with the little pumps. So Deb has readjusted the pH in the reservoir. It did wander a little bit. We had it down to what they asked for. It was 6.4, Deb? Is that right? 6.5. And so Deb's readjusted the pH, and we're getting ready to turn the pump on, and Deb's going to go ahead and plug it in. Let's see what happens. We haven't seen it yet either. This is live. And look at this. Maybe we got a little too much flow, but this is what we've got the flow adjusters for. Watch out, it's going to spit at you. So we'll just adjust down some of these right here, like that one there. There we go, look at that, see? There. Maybe a little more. So there you go. These things are working great. This is exactly the way you should do it. Don't try the vortex emitters. Okay, we got them all running. We have turned half of them off because they recommend that you just use one dripper for the first, how long?
I bet that there's 3 to 4 days.
First 3 to 4 days, one dripper, and then we turn both drippers on. So we've got one dripper on, one dripper off. Everything is flowing, everything's going down the drain. You can see the water coming down. Any excess water that goes into these slabs and cubes is just going to go right through into the table and just run off and down into the drain and back into the reservoir. So it's okay. I mean, that just shows you how much water's still in them, because it's not holding this water, it's just shooting right through. It's Monday, February 15th, and it's Family Day in Ontario. That means Deb and I have the day off today to do a little more work around the house. One of the things we're going to do is turn on both drippers. These plants have had just one dripper on them for the last several days, just to give them a chance to get acclimatized and used to their new home. And as you can see, they're coming along nicely. They're starting to show some nice green, vigorous growth. That means they're taking into the cubes just fine. Something else we're going to do, right now we've been running under the one Phantom Dual 630. We're going to hang a second one. We're going to run two 630 watt Phantom Duals over this 4x4 table. We're going to supercharge the light, we're going to supercharge the feed, and we're going to maximize our yield. Okay, second light is hung. I'm trying to center it over the table as much as possible. I think I did a pretty good job. It's just firing up. The room's going to start getting warmer now, and they're going to start growing faster. So we'll be taking measures to make sure that they don't get too tall after a couple of days. I'm also going to fire up the carbon filter and get some exhaust going in here, because the temperature is going to get up. It's going to accumulate up here in the ceiling, and this 8-inch duct is going to suck it out through the carbon filter and into the furnace room. Attaching the air pump is always an issue. Sometimes you attach it to a pole like we did in the ebb and flow series with Deb. You get vibration and you get noise. So I'm trying something different here. What I'm doing is I'm actually hanging it. It's suspended from this cross brace, kind of in midair. So there's no noise. It keeps it up above the reservoir, the water level, because if there was ever a power failure, if you had it down on the floor, it could just kind of siphon back into the pump and basically burn up the pump. So keeping it above the water level is important, and how you do that makes a big difference in how much noise you get from it. It's just that constant humming sound. And you can see that there's no sound coming from this one because it's just kind of hanging there in midair. So that's it for today. There you go. Lots more light. And right now I've got these set at 85%. We'll start to crank that up as the plants start to grow better. I don't know if we'll hit 105, but we'll definitely going up to 100. So right now we're at 85% on both lights. Tuesday, February the 16th. Plants have been in for almost a week now. We've been feeding them an introductory level of nutrient, and they are now finished with that. We're now emptying the res. So we've got our drain line, which is the yellow one, and that's going out to the shower, and then we got the green one, which is the line in, and that's what we'll be using to fill the res after. And we'll be upping the food a little bit. Everybody seems to be taking fairly well, and they're starting to show some growth, which is nice. The system's been working fantastic. We're going to go on now to two drippers running at the same time for each plant. Here's the chart Deb put together for the three-part GrowTech nutrient, the precision three-part Grow, Bloom, Micro, the Vitamax, the Bud Fuel, the Monster Bloom, and the Heavy Bud. And then you can see it's week one. This is the one we just did, and we're now pumping out of the reservoir. And now this is the one we're going to be making today after we refill it. So that's the pre-flower, and week two, 12/12, it starts a week from now. We've emptied out the res, and we're just giving it a little wipe down. You see there's a lot of stuff in the water there. That's mostly rock wool that's come off of the fresh cubes. There's a certain amount of particulate that's going to come loose from the cubes and get washed down into your res. And our little bilge pump there, the hand bilge pump, gets it out at the bottom of the res really good and into the bucket, and we can dispose of it properly. So Deb's just put the last two ingredients into the reservoir. The reservoir is filling right now with lukewarm water, just a little bit cool, not too warm, not too cold. Got our bubblers going. Everything's ready to go. It's mixing itself as the water comes in, but we'll give it a little stir too. So the last part is putting in some 85% pH down. We're adjusting the pH down to 5.7, right?
This week, yes, we're going to 5.7.
Tending your plants is important. Even up in the beginning, we were seeing some of these lower leaves down here are turning colors, and it's good to just get those dying leaves off. They're going to do that. You're going to get it all the time. Keep your plants clean. So this is the final step, the final pHing of the water. Our target is 5.7 right now. It is gone to 5.8. We're almost there. Deb, you were pretty good with your amount that you put in there. You really know your stuff.
Here we go.
And there we go. 5.7. Wow. To hit it bang on while the res is filling, Deb put the pH down in there, and there you go. Perfect. Way to go, Deb. Good morning. It's February 18th. I'm just checking the pH and the res. It's about to turn on. And of course, we're going to adjust both of the drippers to turn them both on. So looks like we're at 5.8 right now, which is pretty close. 5.7 is the optimum. I might just quickly throw a little bit of pH down in there just real quick before it starts to flood, just to get it back down to 5.7. Okay, let's see what we're at now. And it looks like we're at 5.7. So that's perfect. Ready for the flood. Should turn on any second. All right, the flood is on, so the drippers are all working. Let's just call them emitters. There's really no drippers on there. It's really a steady flow of moisture, but you see we've got both opened and running on each plant, so they're going to get a good feed. We shouldn't consider these waterings. We should consider these feedings. Any excess water that goes into the rock wool simply drains off. Rock wool is only going to hold 50% water and 50% air. When it gets above the 50% level, then it all runs off and goes down there. It's February 24th. Let's have a look at where the plants are. You can see they're starting to take to their new home pretty nicely. It's taken some longer than others, but like this one here is really kicking in. It's almost time to turn them back to 12 and 12. They've been in there a couple of weeks. We've gone through the introductory nutrient feed. We've gone through week 1 feed, and it's almost time to turn them to 12 and 12. So let's just have a look at the chart here. Get back here where you can see it. So we've done week 1, the introductory. We've done pre-flower, which is the one that we just emptied, and Deb is now filling for week 1 of 12 and 12, and you can see the numbers are all different here. You see how much the grow has gone down, the bloom has gone up, and the micro stays the same. So that's the difference in a 3-part. You use more of the grow and less of the bloom in the grow stage, and then you use more of the bloom and less of the grow in the flower stage. Micro always stays the same. So Deb's just putting in the last couple of ingredients into the mix. Res is filling up. It's almost full. It's getting there. See, we got our little clip to hold the hose on there. You get yourself one of those clips. Holding that hose on is important. If it slips out, it's going to be all over your floor, so you don't want that to happen. Get yourself a clip. Okay, so time for the most critical part, and that is the pHing. So Deb's got her 85% pH down. Just putting in a couple of eyedroppers full, and then we'll give it a check and see where the pH is at. So we got the reservoir filled. One of the things you really want to make sure of is that you get these valves turned in the right direction. So we're turning off the drain and we're turning on the intake so that the pump can pump it in. If you forget to turn those, you could have a problem on your hands. So make sure you do that. So Deb has put the pH down in. She's just now going to check the pH just to see where it's at. And let's see if we can get in there good. So like 5, is it 5.5? Yeah, so we're probably about a point lower than we would normally be, but that's okay. So the last thing you're going to want to do is readjust your time periods. So when Deb drained the res, she had to turn it from auto, which means it automatically goes off at the times you set, and she turned it to on, which turned the pump on, drained the reservoir, and then of course you hit off and it turns it off. Don't forget to put it back on to auto before you walk away.